Hello and welcome to another Overlord lore video, and today we once again will take a look at the invasion of the kingdom of Re-Estize. And since we have finished the last video with a talk about the political background, let's start this video off with even more politics. But before we do so, I say thanks to my Patreons for supporting this channel. Now, after the attack on the Sorcerer Kingdom's grain carriage by Philippe, and a misunderstanding between Ainz and the Floor Guardians, Albedo, in her role as the Prime Minister of the Sorcerer Kingdom, traveled to the capital of Re-Estize and informed King and Court that the Sorcerer Kingdom intends to attack in the next month, and that they wish to conquer them with their undead army, instead of repeatedly casting super team magic until the entire kingdom's population is made up of only 5 adorable goats. While the abandonment of super team magic by the Sorcerer Kingdom was indeed good news, King Ramposa III, still traumatized by the impression the last annual war had left, as well as the loss of Gazav Stronov and most of his army, wanted to avoid another battle at all cost. But despite the king offering his own head in order to avoid another massacre, like that of the Cuts Plain, Albedo declined and left the capital shortly after. Now, even if Albedo would take pity with the New World beings, she wasn't able to call off the attack at that point, because while the Sorcerer Kingdom had announced that the invasion will begin in a month, the attack actually commenced right away. Which finally brings us to the main act, the invasion itself. The general strategy against the kingdom of Re-Estize was thought up by Cocytus, who after the bitter defeat against the Lizardman heroes, the victory against them in the second battle, and through his role as their newfound leader on the campaign against the Totemen of the Greater Lake, had gained an incredible amount of experience to the point that even without gaining another level, as for example a strategist, he was now capable to come up with a plan that deeply impressed Ainz. And the strategy of Cocytus was segmented into different stages. The first stage focused nearly the completely available military apparatus on the border regions between the kingdom and the Arkland Council State, and the kingdom and the slain theocracy. These efforts were undertaken in order to dissuade any outsider from intervening, by cutting the kingdom off from any potential allies, since the Dwarven Kingdom, currently led by the Regency Council, is allied with the Sorcerer Kingdom. The northern half of the Holy Kingdom is under the sway of Neyar, and the Empire of Baharut remains a vassal state of the Sorcerer Kingdom. They wouldn't rush to the kingdom's aid either, thus leaving the nation completely at the non-existent mercy of the Sorcerer Kingdom's undead armies. During this first stage of secrecy, Demiurge had managed to prevent any information leaks, while Albedo incited part of the nobility to rebel against the crown, further adding towards the confusion. Now, to visualize the movement of the silent unseen part of the army, the eastern part of Re-Estize was attacked first, with undead troops quickly moving up north towards the port city of Re-Estize, before turning towards the port city of Ina Uru. After this they turned southwest, making way to the western shores of the kingdom, while avoiding any moves towards the capital city of Re-Estize itself. The undead troops presumably also annihilated cities on the western shores of Re-Estize that lie in close proximity to the Arkland Council State, as to prevent reinforcement by sea from this side, thus fully severing the connection between the Arkland Council State and Re-Estize, preventing the state of the Dragonlords from sending in arms and armies, with any land route blockaded, the major ports in the north occupied, and even the airspace controlled by deaf warriors capable of attacking from a distance by throwing his sword, and elder liches capable of flight and ranged magic. The same strategy was employed in the south, likely coming from the recently pacified demi-human enclave, while smaller detachments of the Sorcerer Kingdom started from its capital and moved along the southern border. The undead troops occupied the already isolated region, thus preventing reinforcement from the slain theocracy via the land route. If the state of the 6 great gods would have chosen to send in armies via naval landing forces, they would need to sail around the northern part of the Holy Kingdom, thus alerting any undead forces and their living subjects currently distributing food to the struggling populace there, as well as being noticed and reported by the Cultist of Justice, as well as being noticed and reported by Demiurge's doppelganger king, considering that only 2 breaches from the side of the Arkland Council State occurred, namely by the leader of Red Drop, who is allied with Platinum Dragonlord, but had chosen to relieve the city of Ina Uru on his own, and Platinum Dragonlord's armor, capable of teleportation via wild magic. The strategy was indeed a great success. The same can be said about the occupation of the southern border region. Aside from the Black scripture slipping in, the slain theocracy didn't send any troops. And even the Black was only there to recruit powerful adventurers, lacking the military power to save the kingdom. And it also has to be noted that everyone making it past the lines of the Sorcerer Kingdom was either in possession of Yggdrasil gear, at least in the realm of heroes, or had access to wild magic. And with that said, let's move on to the battles themselves. The fewer but highly mobile and incredibly powerful troops of the Sorcerer Kingdom dominated the engagement from the very beginning. But even though Nazarick could have ended everything within hours, by activating every ounce of military strength they had available, they mostly deployed undead troops of relatively low level, Death Knights, Death Warriors, and Elder Liches among others. This was due to the other goal of this war, since Nazarick's supremacy was evident from the very first second. The Sorcerer Kingdom wanted to use this opportunity to experiment with different tactics and strategies. Furthermore, rather than handing command to Demiurge, who is extremely well versed in any matters of military importance, the other Floor Guardians were granted the opportunity to experiment and test out plans of their very own. For example, Shaltia developed a strategy of essentially undead paratroopers. She was using one of the frost dragons she is already familiar with to transport Soul Eaters to cities and towns and drop them. While the Soul Eater will suffer falling damage, they would also be able to heal themselves by consuming souls of the inhabitants, thus limiting their window of relative vulnerability to the initial minutes of the engagement. But this tactic, while successful, comes with risks of its very own. One Soul Eater, already weakened from the fall, became stuck and thus was unable to move out and harvest souls, effectively removing the unit from the battlefield. Furthermore, Shaltia discovered that there is no wind resistance in the New World, something that was talked about in regards to the fly spell. And regardless whether or not this was always the case in the New World, or if a world-class item changed the laws of physics in order to strengthen every flight-related ability, the confirmation of this discovery is quite valuable. While Ainz had already dropped Overlords to the ground in order to see if they take damage, which wasn't the case, the information that Soul Eaters do take damage might indicate that falling damage is perhaps negated due to Ainz's high tier nullification, reducing physical damage inflicted by everything under the level of 60 by 100%. But if wind resistance and drag doesn't play a role at all, then the dropping of essentially rocks from greater altitudes and their uninterrupted increase in velocity could be used like a low-orbit bombardment, granting Nazarick yet another OP way of destroying stuff. Another strategy tried out was the mass casting of Fireball in population centers by hundreds of Elder Liches, burning entire towns down to the ground within seconds. And since Elder Liches are able to use spells like Fly and Invisibility alongside offensive magic, the Liches themselves can employ this strategy independently from transportation units, such as the Frost Dragons, increasing their versatility on a strategic level quite a bit. To put it bluntly, the Elder Liches could act like the Tyranid swarms from Warhammer 40k. They appear out of the blue, destroy a town, cast invisibility, and the only thing the defenders will find is scorched earth, and no clue where the aggressor went. And thus another truly horrifying weapon was added to the arsenal of Nazarick. But perhaps the thing that Ainz had hoped for the most, a defeat, still eluded him. Now, the reason why Einsulgaun wanted Nazarick to lose a few battles is because he craved the opportunity to learn from defeat. Since the Sorcerer Kingdom was clearly superior and almost all of the troops deployed against Re-Estize were replaceable low and mid-tier undead, it would be much better to experience losses and uncover the reason for their defeats now. Their stakes are extremely low from Nazarick's point of view, rather than waging war against the flying city in the desert, or the Arkland Council State only to discover flaws in their own offensive and defensive capability after the relatively speaking strong Dragon Lords had halted their assault, went behind Nazarick's line, and inflicted great casualties by, for example, killing off capable leaders like Jerknev, or disrupting the potion and runecraft weapon production in Karn, or even worse, capturing important members of Nazarick, like one of the Pleiades, who, while incredibly strong by New World standards, wouldn't be able to fend off Dragon Lords or their armor. thus putting real leverage over Nazarick in the hand of its enemies. And finally, with their actions hidden from the face of the world, and a month of annihilation passing by, the main army of the Sorcerer Kingdom finally moved towards the capital of the Kingdom of Re-Estize. But they did it at a painfully slow pace, in order to, as Prince Zanek would put it fittingly, exert even more pressure on the citizens of Re-Estize, because the looming threat of an incoming enemy army and the uncertainty and fear connected to it caused civil unrest and uprising in part of the country. But before we can discuss what happened there, another set of experimentation will be highlighted. The Siege of Enaiuru, which is not only that what Nazarick craved, but also the topic of the next video. But before I highlight this battle, I want to raise some rather uncomfortable things to your attention. Einzelgarn annihilated the kingdom, but in contrast to the hell the Holy Kingdom went through, it wasn't planned. And with his excuse of deliberately introducing flaws into the plans to encourage critical thinking within the Floor Guardians, Ainz could at any point have put an end to it. Not only this war, but to the whole world conquest in general. He could just have, quote-unquote, revealed the true plan, to pretend to be warlike but from now on focus on the building and improvement of Erental. Now that trade partners and good diplomatic relationships to the surrounding nations are established, the peace and plenty of Nazarick would draw in masses of impoverished people in search for a better life, something that to a degree has already happened. And while the theocracy and the council state are running around screaming how dangerous the Sorcerer King and his nation truly is, it will provide the masses with a much better life, until they are turning against the 6 great gods and the Dragon Lords in favor of Ainz. Now, the reason I dare to criticize and suggest an alternative strategy is not that I believe that Ainz should somehow morally care about the millions of dead humans, because we are way past that discussion ever since the Lizardman arc, not to mention the end of Archer at the hand, or perhaps Tongue of Schaltir. Remarking this because there's an old German proverb, der Schweif wedelt mit dem Hund, or in English, the tail wags with the dog. And this is most certainly the case here. Albedo and Demiurge had basically taken over the initiative. In the beginning of the series, Ainz defied Albedo, who insisted that he should stay indoors. He also personally dealt with Schaltir, despite the risk of death at the hand of the unknown enemy and the Bloody Valkyrie. He also entered the arena of the Empire and traveled to the Dwarven Kingdom all on his own, not to mention the Project Paradise and the reinvention of the Adventurer Guild. But now he's just taking orders, despite him having a good excuse and excellent insight into the situation. And I'm fully aware that Ainz sees the denizens of Nazarick as his children, but currently he's letting them run around in the supermarket, watching them destroying whatever they want, out of fear that they would throw a tantrum or be mad at him. Sometimes a father has to say no to his kids, precisely because he wants the best for them, and I hope that by the end of Overlord, Ainz fully matures and becomes an actor, and not somebody that merely reacts. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, and special thanks to Adam J, Al Capone, Andy, Angel of Death, Bad Guy Yee, Boyzilla, Chrissy, Diabetic Centaur, Dystopia, Elika Birchleaf, Felice Catus, Feral Shivan, Gigafight, Ghost of Epicness, Hector Marino, Hoss, Jason, Kleinator, Chromius, Large, Lord Touch Me, Lord Ulbert Elaine Odell, Luces Ollie, Majima, Matt, Matt C, Marcos, Mr. Shoes, Mindless Wrath, Minnow 13, Myrtis, Inferior's Potion, Primus 11, Sasuga Einsama, Sebastian, Shadow Lightning Wolf, Surge, Sparkly Unicorn, Vash Hawkeye, Zoggo, Bane of a Lot, and Zonagon. Thanks guys. Anyway, have a nice day, over and out.